Hi Julian, welcome to this video lesson. As I see, you have number 2 through number 19 as your homework, and of course there's a word problem after this. So let's start. Number 2 is about simplifying the square root of 72. The idea is for you to break down the number under the square root into its factors, pair them up, and when you see the same factor twice under the square root, you take it out. Probably you know the rule, right? So then square root of 72 is going to be the same as the square root of, we can write down 72 as 36 times 2, and 36 is 6 times 6. So this becomes 6 times 6 times 2. And as we have a pair of 6's, we can take a 6 out of the square root. So this becomes equal to 6 times the square root of 2. So this is 6 square root 2. Number 3, square root of 175. We are going to do the same thing. Break down 175 as, well, 175 is a multiple of 25. So why not write this as 25 times 7, that's 175. And then 25 can be written as 5 times 5. So this is the square root of 5 times 5 times 7. As we have a pair of 5's under the square root, take it out. So this becomes equal to 5 multiplied with the square root of 7, written as 5 square root of 7. So this one's 5 square root 7. For number 4 and number 5, we need to use a property of square roots, and that is, if you have the square root of a fraction, so you have the fraction a over b and you want to find its square root, this is going to be equal to the square root of the numerator over the square root of the denominator. So number 4 is square root of 64 over 81. As I said, we can write this down as the square root of 64 over the square root of 81. And 64 can be written as 8 times 8. And 81 can be written as 9 times 9. Therefore, this is going to be equal to, we have two 8's. So this is 8 and this one is 2 9's over 9. And you probably knew that the square root of 64 is 8 and the square root of 81 is 9. So this is going to be 8 over 9. Number 5, square root of 32 over 4. Well, 32 is nothing but, we can write this as square root of 32 over the square root of 4, which is equal to, 32 can be written as 16 times 2, right? And 16 is nothing but 4 times 4. So we have 4 times 4 times 2, that's 32. And on the bottom, square root of 4, probably you knew that this is going to be 2. But we can always break this down as 2 times 2. So basically we have a pair of 2's, so a 2 comes out. So this becomes a 2. Now we have a pair of 4's on the top. So this becomes equal to 4 outside the square root multiplied with the square root of 2 over the square root of 4 is 2. And you can simplify this 2 with this 4. You can write a 2 here. So this is going to be equal to the square root of 2 multiplied with the square root of 2. There was another way to do square root of 32 over 4 actually. You could have simplified the fraction first. So what I mean by that is, let me just quickly show you. So this becomes equal to the square root of 32 over 4. That's 32 divided with 4. That's 8. So we have square root of 8. Now 8 can be written as 2 times 2 times 2. So we can pair up two of these 2's. So 1 2 comes out and there's 1 2 that's left without a pair, so it stays under the square root. So this becomes 2 square root of 2. Either way, the answer is 2 square root of 2. Number 6, k square is equal to 16. So then k, if you take the square root on both sides, this is going to be equal to square root of 16. But it's going to be actually plus or minus square root of 16, because if you multiply a negative with another negative, it becomes a positive. So this is going to be plus or minus, and square root of 16 is 4. So k is either positive 4, in that case k square is 16, or k could also be negative 4. Like I said, a negative times a negative, negative 4 times a negative 4 is going to give you a positive 16. So we have two answers for k, plus or minus 4. Number 7, we have 5n square is equal to negative 500. 5n square is equal to negative 500. So what's n square? You divide both sides with 5 and you get n square is equal to negative 500 divided by 5 is negative 100. Now think about this. The square of a number is negative. Can the square of any real number be negative? If the number is positive, if you square it, you're going to get a positive. If the number is negative and you square it, like I said in the previous problem, a negative times negative is a positive. So even then you're supposed to get a positive. In other words, the square of any real number can never be negative, right? It can be an imaginary number though, but we are talking about real numbers in this exercise. So n square is equal to negative 100. Well, there's no such n. So we would say no solution to this one. Number 8, negative 7n square is equal to negative 448. You divide both sides with negative 7. So you get n square is equal to, well, 448 divided by 7 is 64. So like we did on number 6, n is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 64, and the square root of 64 is 8. Therefore, n is going to be equal to plus or minus 8. So this one's plus or minus 8. Number 9, we have x square minus 1 is equal to 24. You add the 1 to both sides. That means you do a plus 1 plus 1. These two cross out. You have x square is equal to 25. And this brings back a similar kind of a situation as number 6 or the previous problem that we just did. So if x square is 25, x is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 25, which is plus or minus 5. So this one's plus or minus 5. Number 10, x square minus 50 is equal to 0. X square minus 50 is equal to 0. You want to take the 50 on the other side by adding 50 to both sides, right? So you have x square, these two cross out, is equal to 50. So x is going to be plus or minus the square root of 50, but don't stop there. The square root of 50 can be simplified as follows. We are going to break it down into its factors. Now 50 is what? It's 25 times 2. So that's 5 times 5. That's 25 times 2. And we have a pair of 5s. So 5 comes out. This is going to be equal to plus or minus 5 multiplied with the square root of 2. So that's x on number 10. Plus or minus 5 square root 2. Number 11, x squared plus 3 is equal to 51. Let's write that down. X squared plus 3 is equal to 51. The first thing you want to do is move the 3 on the other side. So you have x squared. You actually subtract 3 from both sides to be able to do that. These two cross out. You have x squared is equal to 48. And therefore, x is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 48 by taking square roots on both sides. But then this can be simplified. What's the square root of 48? Let's find that out. We can write down 48 as 16 times 3. And 16 is nothing but 4 times 4. So we have square root of 4 times 4 times 3. This is going to be equal to plus or minus. You have one pair of 4s, so 4 comes out, multiplied with the square root of 3. So this one's x is equal to. So when I write equals in all of these, I mean x is equal to, or n is equal to, or k is equal to, whatever the variable is, the answer is equal to. So don't get confused with that. I'm not writing the name of the variable in the answer. So this one gives us x is equal to plus or minus 4 square root 3. Number 12, x minus 5 whole square minus 100 is 0. X minus 5 whole square minus 100 is equal to 0. You want to take the 100 on the other side by adding 100 to both sides. These two cross out. So you have x minus 5 whole square is equal to 100. Now think about this. Forget x. We are saying something square is equal to 100. What is that something? We take square roots on both sides like we did on number 6, number 8, number 7 of course didn't have any solution, number 9 and all these problems. So basically you first want to solve for x minus 5. Think about this in this way. Let's say if I said y square is equal to 100, what would you do? You will take square roots on both sides and you will end up getting y is equal to plus or minus the square root of 100. Now 100 is 10 times 10. So this is plus or minus the square root of 10 times 10. We have a pair of 10s. So this is plus or minus 10. Now what's y? Y is nothing but x minus 5 over here. So we have x minus 5 is equal to plus or minus 10. You want to find x, not x minus 5. Therefore, you add 5 to both sides. Now, adding 5 to both sides can be confusing over here. Plus or minus 10 plus 5. Now, this actually means two things. There are two answers to the problem. One is you use plus 10 and you do a plus 5. A plus 5 over here. So that gives you x as 15. And then you use negative 10 or minus 10 and then you do a plus 5. So that gives you negative 10 plus 5 is negative 5. So there are two answers, 15 and negative 5. So over here we have x is equal to negative 5 comma 15. I hope that makes sense. So don't get confused with this plus or minus. It just means plus 10 or minus 10. Plus 10 on this side, minus 10 on this side. Add 5 to both, you get two different answers. Number 13, let's write that down. X minus 2 whole square minus 12 is equal to 0. Your first job is to take the 12 on the other side by adding 12. So that gives us x minus 2 whole square is equal to 12. Now this is like saying some y, let's call this a y again. So y square is equal to 12, and therefore y is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 12. Now the square root of 12 can be broken down. This is plus or minus the square root of 12 is nothing but 2 times 2 times 3. And we have a pair of 2's. So a 2 comes out. So this becomes equal to plus or minus 2 multiplied with square root of 3. That's y. And what's y? Y is nothing but x minus 2. So we have x minus 2 is equal to either, there are two different numbers over here. Either it's plus 2 square root of 3, or x minus 2 is equal to negative 2 square root of 3. So probably this is how I should have broken down the previous problem when I did that negative 5 and 15. But this is what it means. Plus or minus 2 square root of 3 means either this or this. Now if x minus 2 is this, then x is going to be, you add 2 to both sides. So this gives us x is equal to 2 plus 2 square root 3. Right? This is one of our answers. Or if x minus 2 is this, you add 2 to both sides, you end up getting x is equal to 2 minus 2 square root 3. This is the other answer. So we have 2 plus 2 square root 3 or 2 minus 2 square root 3. Alright. Number 14, 3x squared plus 7 is equal to 55. So we have 3x squared plus 7 is equal to 55. Take the 7 on the other side by subtracting 7 from both sides. You have 3x squared is equal to 55 minus 7 is 48. You divide both sides with 3 because you need x squared to be able to get x. These two cancel out. You have x squared is equal to 48 divided by 3 is 16. So when x squared is 16, x is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 16, and the square root of 16 is 4. So this is going to be equal to plus or minus 4. Let's write this down. Number 15, p minus 4 whole square is equal to 16. Our first job is to solve for p minus 4 by assuming that this is one single y or something like that. You know what I mean? So you take the square root on both sides. So you have something like y squared is equal to 16. So y is going to be plus or minus the square root of 16, which is 4. So this is plus or minus 4. Now what's y? Y is p minus 4. So we have p minus 4 is equal to plus 4, or p minus 4, that's y, is equal to negative 4. Positive 4 or negative 4, you want p. So you add 4 on both sides of both these equations. So either you have p is equal to 8 or you have p is equal to 0. So this one is either 0 or 8. Both these values of p can fit in, so that you have p minus 4 whole square is equal to 16. Well, number 16, we have 2k minus 1 whole squared is equal to 9. First job is to solve for 2k minus 1. So pretend that this is one big y, and that's equal to y squared is equal to 9. Therefore y is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. So this is plus or minus 3. But what's y? Y is nothing but 2k minus 1. So either 2k minus 1 is equal to plus 3 or 2k minus 1 is equal to negative 3. Now we want k. Therefore, you add 1 to both sides. You can also add 1 in the same step over here. So we have 2k is equal to 4 over here, or 2k is equal to negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. Divide both sides with 2. You have k is equal to 4 divided by 2 is 2, and k is equal to negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. These are the two values of k that would fit in. So that's negative 1 and 2. We move on to number 17. 10 times x minus 7 whole squared is equal to 440. Your first job is to separate out, isolate x minus 7 whole square. So you want to divide both sides of this equation with 10. So that we have x minus 7 whole square is equal to 440 divided by 10. You can just take out the zeros from the end. So that's 44 over 1, which is 44. So now pretend that this is one big y, so that we have y square is equal to 44. Now y is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 44, and that can be simplified because 44 is nothing but 4 times 11 and 4 is nothing but 2 times 2, right? So that we have y is equal to plus or minus, a 2 comes out, 2 square root of 11. Now what's y? Y is nothing but x minus 7. So we have x minus 7 is equal to either its 2 square root of 11, the positive root, or x minus 7 is equal to negative 2 square root of 11. Now that's x minus 7. We need x. So we add 7. So we have x is equal to 7 plus 2 square root of 11. That's on one side. Or if you add 7 to both sides of this equation, you have x is equal to 7 minus 2 square root of 11. That's the other number that fits in. So two answers as you would expect for a quadratic equation to have. So these are 7 plus 2 square root of 11 and 7 minus 2 square root of 11. There you go. Let's move on to number 18. 2 multiplied with x plus 3 whole squared minus 18 is equal to 0. The first job is to take the 18 on the other side by adding 18. So we have 2 multiplied with x plus 3 whole squared is equal to 18. Let's solve for x plus 3 whole squared first by dividing both sides with 2. So we have x plus 3 whole squared is equal to 18 divided with 2 is 9. Now you want to solve for x plus 3 again. It's about like imagining this thing to be one single y. I'm not going to write a y over here because I think you have had enough practice with y. So pretend that this is a y mentally. So x plus 3 is going to be equal to this plus or minus the square root of 9, and that's plus or minus 3. So we have either x plus 3 as positive 3, this 3, is equal to either that's positive 3 or x plus 3 is equal to negative 3. You want to solve for x, subtract 3. So these two cross out, these two cross out, 3 minus 3 is 0. So either x is equal to 0 or subtract 3, you have x is equal to negative 6. So the answers over here are 0 and negative 6. Last problem on this sheet, number 19. 9 multiplied with 2m minus 3 whole squared plus 8 is equal to 449. First things first, take the 8 on the other side, subtract 8. So that gives us 9 times 2m minus 3 whole squared is equal to 449 minus 8 is 441. What about 2m minus 3 whole squared? To find that out, you want to divide both sides with 9. So then 2m minus 3 whole squared becomes equal to, now 441 divided by 9. How much is that? 450 divided by 9 is 50. So this is going to be 49. Okay, perfect. Now 2m minus 3 whole squared is this. So what's 2m minus 3? Again, you want to imagine this to be one single y. I'm not going to write that down. So 2m minus 3 is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 49. And what's the square root of 49? 49 is 7 times 7. So this is just 7. Now we have either 2m minus 3 is equal to plus 7 or 2m minus 3 is equal to negative 7. You want to solve for m, add 3, add 3. So you have 2m is equal to 7 plus 3 is 10. Divide both sides with 2. You have m is equal to 5. That's one of our answers. Or on the other side, you again add 3, add 3. So you have 2m is equal to negative 7 plus 3 is negative 4. You divide both sides with 2. You get m is equal to, what's m? M is equal to negative 2. That's the other answer. So this one is either m is negative 2 or m is 5. Right then, so that's all the problems you had on this page. Now I'm going to upload the word problem you sent me. A man standing at the top of a cliff that is 225 feet tall drops a penny. The distance from the penny to the ground can be modeled by the equation h is equal to negative 16t squared plus s, where h is the height from the ground, t is the time in seconds, and s is the initial height from the ground in feet. How long will it take for the penny to reach the ground? Round your answer to the nearest tenth of a second. Okay, fine, fair enough. Okay, so what's actually going on is there's a man, there's a cliff. This is the ground. Pretend that this is the ground. And there's a cliff. Now the height of this cliff is this s. S is the initial height from the ground in feet. So what's the initial height? The initial height is s. And it's given that the cliff is 225 feet tall. So basically, this is the cliff. This height is s, the initial height from where the coin is dropped, and that is 225. So this s in this equation, we can easily replace that with 225 feet. So from this 225 feet cliff, the man drops a coin. The coin falls down, and its height above the ground at a certain point in time, this is what we refer to as the h in this equation. The height above the ground is h, and that's given by this equation, where t is the time it takes to fall from the top of the cliff to this point. I hope this is clear to you that s and 225 are the same, because S is the initial height, and the initial height is nothing but the height of the cliff from where the coin is dropped, right? Okay. So we need to find how long is it going to take for the penny to reach the ground. Now, when the penny reaches the ground, what happens? What happens to the height? When the penny reaches the ground, it hits the ground over here. What happens to this height? The height becomes 0. So this becomes 0. Now, in this equation, if we replace this with 0, we end up having something like 0 is equal to negative 16t square plus 225. We need to find how long will it take. How long will it take means t is equal to what? So for what value of t is this equation going to be true? In other words, we need to solve this equation for t. So let's get going. You can either take the 225 on the other side or the 16t square on the other side. I prefer to take the 16t square on the other side by adding 16t square to both sides of this equation. So what I end up having is 16t square is equal to, these two cancel out, is equal to 225. So t square, you can solve for t square by dividing both sides with 16. So t square is going to be equal to 225 over 16. These two cancel out, right? And t is going to be equal to the square root of 225 over 16. Now, in one of the previous problems on the previous page, I think it was one of the first few problems, I told you that square root of a fraction is equal to the square root of the numerator over the square root of the denominator. So this is going to be equal to the square root of 225 over the square root of 16. Now 225, you can try and factor 225. You can write this down as 15 times 15. You can try that out. And 16 is nothing but 4 times 4. In fact, you know the square root of 16 is going to be 4. So this is 15 over 4. And 15 divided with 4 is 3.75. Now the question is, it requires you to round your answer to the nearest tenth of a second. So we are not going to keep it as 3.75. We are going to round this to 3.8 seconds. This is the time taken by the penny to reach the ground. I hope that helps. Thank you so much for your time, Julian. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you soon.